So, as president, would you support sending U.S. Special Forces over the border into Mexico to take out fentanyl labs, to take out drug cartel operations? Would you support that kind of American military use?
Yes, and I will do it on day one. Here's the thing. The cartels are killing tens of thousands of our fellow citizens. You want to talk about a country in decline? You have the cartels controlling a lot of part of your southern border. We have to reestablish the rule of law, and we have to defend our people. The President of the United States has got to use all available powers as commander-in-chief to protect our country and to protect the people. So when they're coming across, yes, we're going to use lethal force. Yes, we reserve the right to operate. How many more tens of thousands are we going to let to die? I am sick. I've met angel moms throughout this country. I met a lady in Texas named Tracy, and her son took one Percocet that was laced with fentanyl, immediately died. That is happening all across this country because of the poison that they are bringing in. So as president, would I use force? Would I treat them as foreign terrorist organizations? You're darn right I would.
You know, how dare he? How dare he use fentanyl as an excuse? How dare he do that, you know, of an excuse for extreme brutality and bigotry and racism to people across the border, you know, as a vehicle to get him to place these anti-immigrant laws in Florida, where a lot of the economy is really propped up by people who come from over the border. Sure, if you want to reform the immigration system to make sure that these people come in legally and efficiently for both parties, talk about that. Talk about human beings, talk about compassion. But, you know, this fentanyl, it's like a boogeyman, scary monster. The story that he told about the woman who lost her child, I mean, come on. They're not talking about school shootings. They're not talking about the children dying there, but they want to paint this boogeyman like Mexico is just so terrible. Now take a look at this article from Vanity Fair. So this article is entitled Floridians are literally paying millions for Ron DeSantis' ridiculous culture wars. And this is a report. This is by Bess Levin. And yeah, let's talk about this. This is just kind of ridiculous when you really think about it, because he's talking about saving Floridians money, but A, it's making them look crazy. B, it's not really saving them money in the end when he's got to pay so many lawsuits. So Ron DeSantis' wars on free speech, the LGBTQ community, black history, black voters, pregnant people, and immigrants. The victims are clear. The victims are clear. You know, we have here who our victims are. The other people being victimized by the laws being signed as part of the Florida governor's absurd war on woke. Woke meaning everything non-white male. Women, immigrants, blacks, Latinos, anything. Except for the Latinos who play their silly little boys club game. Florida taxpayers who are literally paying for the lawsuits that follow. So, essentially, what you have here is that, you know, he's really talking not to the average Floridians or even Americans. He's talking to the most extreme of that base, the nationalists, the extremists, and the mentally ill. Let's go ahead and get honest, the mentally ill. And it's costing everybody, you know, appealing to a small subgroup, costing everybody. So this article goes on to say, the Don't Say Gay lawyers representing the governor are reportedly charging nearly $1,300 per hour $1,300. He's racked up nearly $17 million in legal fees. So, who's paying for this? It's the taxpayers. It's the taxpayers that are paying for it. It is the taxpayers that are paying for authoritarianism, basically. And then you have another article. That was a great article from Vanity Fair. You have this other article from El País entitled, "Who Will Pick the Fruit Now?" Ron DeSantis' anti-immigration lab is up and running in Florida. This is from Iker Cesdedos. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. My husband would pronounce it Cesdedos. The Portuguese the language is kind of similar to Spanish. It just makes all the S's like a sh. It's like moisture, but he doesn't like when I say that. So he kind of like laughs, but at the same time he's like, This article is ingenious, and I'm so thankful for people like Iker, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, who are putting it making this the real, giving us the real. You know, Ron DeSantis is trying to boot all the immigrants out of Florida, and it's the reason why, just like when Donald Trump left office, there was a bunch of random job vacancies. Because, let's face it, let's be honest, a lot of white people don't want to be going to do these jobs that a lot of immigrants and black people and marginalized people have been taking. Now, they don't want to go and do the jobs that a lot of people who come from over the border have been doing, like picking mangoes and oranges, like the construction jobs. Not only that, these people have been fearing for their lives. They've been fleeing to other states because Florida has made it very, very clear that they are not welcome there. You know, that when the NAACP said Florida is not safe for marginalized communities, they didn't just mean black folks. Oh, no. They also meant Hispanics. They also meant LGBTQ people. It's like Roland Martin said, y'all gonna get your wake-up moment. Black people tried to tell you, you're gonna get your wake-up moment. And it's not gonna be pretty. So the article goes on to say the effect was seen immediately. From one day to the next, we noticed the exodus to other places, explains Benjamin Perez, a Puerto Rican evangelical pastor and community leader. Hope he's a good evangelical. We've been seeing a lot of corrupt ones. Perez, who defines himself as a conservative, traveled to Washington and Tallahassee, the capital of Florida, while the law was being processed in an attempt to make legislators understand that a food crisis is a national crisis. Who will pick the fruit now, he wonders. The fields of tomatoes, mangoes, passion fruit, there will be no one to work them, you know. And among the most unfortunate, they talk about the Confederacy like it created agriculture in and of itself. It's like, y'all, come on, don't be so pompous. But we have to work together to make this work, you know. If you want to advocate for policies that reform the laws, okay, but this is a democratic country. You got to work with Democrats to make that happen. You can't just go lone gun. And Ron DeSantis is, honestly, he's going to pay the price. Look at Donald Trump. He's paying the price. Justice catches up. The article goes on to say Samuel Vichez Santiago, state director of the American Business Immigration Coalition, says that 47% of agricultural jobs in Florida are performed by undocumented workers. Please listen to this. Like, let me just try to help it. Let me try to help it make sense for you, you know. And I'm not trying to insult anyone's intelligence here, but I'm just saying historically the Republican Party has really appealed to people who, for lack of better terms, don't go on to get a university education. They wanted to do these jobs that many undocumented illegal immigrants are doing. They're complaining about it. They're trying to boot them out. They're getting violent with them. But at the same time, they're not taking over those jobs and complaining about how they don't have cash to pay for gas. Well, go and get the jobs that you're saying that you're so passionate about. But common sense standpoint, taking economics out of it, taking the fact that it's just bad policy, just going back to it's not very nice. It's not very nice. Many of us who claim to be Christians, we know that it's not very nice to just boot people out. Imagine if it's your home. You're going to kick people out like that. But 47%, that's almost majority. That means half of the economy of agriculture in Florida depends on immigrants. And then you kick them out. What do you think that's going to do to the economy? Immigrants don't make up 50% of the population. So what is that going to do to the economy? Please help it make sense. Make it make sense for me. It just wasn't smart. Okay, so this is another article. This is from CBS Miami. People aren't showing up to work. South Florida workers are already feeling the heat of the immigration bill. Construction workers say many employees have not showed up to work because they fear for deportation. It's not nice, okay? In Europe, okay, they see that there are many refugees, but let's talk about the term refugees for a moment here, because many Americans don't travel, they don't read, they don't study, they don't get a passport, so they don't really understand it. But if you are a refugee, if you hear the term refugee, and yes, undocumented workers coming from Mexico, risking their lives, climbing over gates and walls, injuring themselves to get to America. If it's that serious, you a doggone refugee. You are a refugee. Nobody would be risking their lives to that extent if it was not serious, if this was not like dependent, if their life wasn't dependent on it. That refugee life ain't easy. It's not easy. And the European Union understands that, the laws against deportation are not so draconian. It's not so medieval. This stuff is medieval, the way that they're approaching this. This is no way to treat human beings. If you want to reform the laws, if you want things to change, okay. But you're going to have to find a different way to advocate for this. It can't be like this. It can't be like this. You're going to have to come up with something that resonates on a better level diplomatically, because the world is listening to this, okay? We are on the world stage. Let me just tell you, in France where I live, even though I'm American, in France where I live, if the outpouring of refugees who come from places that are economically and socially devastated, like apartheid level, genocide level, from places like Syria and Venezuela, Algeria, okay, Tunisia, if those refugees came to France and France treated them like America treats Mexicans, French people would be outraged. Americans should be outraged that Mexico is our brother. It's our neighbor. Who treats their neighbor like this? I'll tell you who does. MAGA Republicans do.
Governor Christie. Thank you, Brett. Thank you, Martha. Look, everybody on this stage wants to be the next president of the United States. And the only way that's going to happen is if we beat Joe Biden. I'm the only one on this stage who's ever beaten a Democratic incumbent in an election. I did it in a deep blue state, being outspent 3-1. Beating a Democratic incumbent is not easy. The last Democratic incumbent president who was defeated was Jimmy Carter. And he was defeated by a conservative governor from a blue state who knew how to get results, who stood for the truth, who cared about accountability, and stood strong and hard against waste. Those are the very things that I did in my 8 years as governor of New Jersey, and it's exactly what I'll do as president of the United States. Believe me, the Democrats want some other nominee who's never beaten a Democratic incumbent. I'm the one who can win this race, and if you give me the chance, I will restore our country by winning.
Do you believe that the recent spike in UFO encounters...
I get the UFO question?
Yeah, you do.
Come on,
there
man.
You go. No, but, okay, we've been hearing a lot of testimony in Congress, and people are taking this a lot more seriously, and we're hearing that, there are things going on that people aren't aware of. So, if you were president, Governor Christie, would you level with the American people about what the government knows about these possible encounters?
Martha, and especially coming from a woman from New Jersey, I think it's horrible that just because I'm from New Jersey, you asked me about unidentified flying objects and Martians. We're different, but we're not that different. Look, of course, the job of the President of the United States is to level with the American people about everything. The job of the President of the United States is to stand for truth. The job of the President of the United States is to be a role model for our children and our grandchildren. And so whether it was UFOs or this problem of education, and Tim's right, by the way, and I started this in 2010 by going right after the teachers' unions in New Jersey and drove them down to an all-time low popularity rating because they were putting themselves before our kids. That is the biggest threat to our country, not UFOs.
Okay, is he really surprised that they're asking about UFOs? They are the conspiracy party. Next, Chris Christie, he strikes me as a good candidate for the Republican Party. But the fact that he's not addressing our problem with white supremacy, about hate crimes, hate speech, the fact that he's tiptoeing around climate change. He's not really talking about how this is something that needs our attention immediately. I would say that he is still somebody who's just going to kind of get in there and whitewash history and sort of plateau us. You know, I think that he will work well with Democrats, so there might be things that happen, progressive things that happen. But I think the next thing highlights how he doesn't really understand the struggle of African Americans.
Governor Christie, another issue. This weekend here in Milwaukee, reports say there were 30 shootings, and a number of them including kids. Add that to the big increase in school shootings around the country. Democrats blame this crisis on easy access to guns. They also blame Republicans for blocking gun control legislation. What would President Christie do?
You know, I'm proud of the fact, Brett, that I'm the only person along with Governor Hutchinson up on this stage who's actually running a United States Attorney's Office. I ran the 5th largest office in America in a state where there is significant urban crime. And the problem is not going to be solved by more money. The problem is that these prosecutors in these localities in the states are refusing to do their job and to arrest violent criminals. So what a President Christie would do is appoint an attorney general who would instruct each of the 93 U.S. attorneys that they are to take over the prosecution of violent crime in every one of those cities that are failing to do so. We have plenty of room in the federal prisons to lock up these violent criminals and clean up what's going on all across this country in these individual cities. Secondly, what we need to make sure that each and every one of these criminals understand is that the laws apply to everybody. And when Hunter Biden fills out a fake application, a false application for a gun permit, and then is facing a 10-year mandatory minimum, which was mandated by legislation sponsored by his father, and then you have a Justice Department that walks away from those charges, we're telling people that the law doesn't apply to everybody. In a Christie administration, he would go to jail for 10 years.
Okay, back to the same thing. Chris Christie, whitewashing, and the same, you know, brand of just white privilege, not really looking at the real issues at hand here. You know, and these, first of all, Hunter Biden is a huge distraction mechanism. They're like, oh, you know, he didn't apply for this gun permit, and he had some pictures of his own damn white booty on his own damn device. Oh, he's terrible. He's horrible. That's the witch. Like, come on, why is he gonna say that he's against Donald Trump, and then appeal to the base in these other weird ways? Like, is he really gonna forge change? That's what makes me ask that. But really quickly, he talks about gun violence. You know he's talking about black people there. Why don't they talk about the white people doing stuff like this?
OC Judge, I just shot my wife. I won't be in tomorrow. Now, if you wrote that in a script for Hollywood, if they weren't on strike, they'd probably say, you got to have some more layers because this is a little silly. We can't just go with that plot. Okay. Orange County judge, though, has been charged now with murder after shooting his wife in an argument. One of his priorities, I better call off work. That's what he did. Soon after pulling a handgun from his ankle holster, fatally shooting his wife, prosecutors say Orange County Superior Court Judge Jeffrey Ferguson alerted his staff that he wouldn't be taking the bench at the Fullerton courthouse to handle the next day's calendar. Quote, I just lost it. I just shot my wife. I won't be in tomorrow. I will be in custody. I'm so sorry. The judge texted his clerk and bailiff, according to documents filed late Thursday by the OC District Attorney's Office. LA Times with the details there.
So what the heck is going on there? I just shot my wife. Sorry, I'm not gonna be able to come to work. Why is he talking about it like it's a cold, like it's a sneeze? Because they glorify guns. When they looked in this man's house, he had so many guns. And Trump's Republican Party has exacerbated this thought that guns are just like the best thing since sliced bread. They put holes in people, you know. They should be treated with attention and care and consideration. And people who are not stable should not have them. You know, we're talking, Chris Christie's and the Asa Hutchinsons are talking about how urban cities are so terrible, but they're not talking about how they got that way, how the government created the ghettos. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. And how black people have been forced into homelessness and crime because they live in some of the most communities targeted by systemic prejudice. Now look at these mugshots. We're talking about urban crime. Why are we not talking about white-collar crime? If we're going to talk about urban crime, let's also really talk about white-collar crime. Now, Chris Christie and Asa Hutchinson are scratching on the surface. They're talking to about it a little bit, but not to the same veracity that they talk about, black people and brown people, urban people, as they say in the ghetto, who are, and this photo is from 11 Alive News, by the way. This is creepy beyond measure, and yeah, these people should be ashamed of themselves.
Another issue is America and the crime crisis, the homelessness crisis. American cities are in decline. People are moving out as homelessness, drugs, crime move in. There are problems accelerated. They did accelerate during the pandemic and are still rising, actually.
Murders in Los Angeles, New York, Chicago, all up 30% between 2019 and 2022. Homelessness is up 11%, the largest jump in recorded history. Vice President Pence, a lot of this began in the COVID era. How much of what we're seeing happening around this country is a result of those COVID lockdowns? And is your administration in part to blame for how we got here?
Well, I think what's in part to blame is the Democrats have been talking about defunding the police for the last 5 years. And we ought to be funding law enforcement, particularly in our major cities, at unprecedented levels. I mean, it's extraordinary to think about the violence that's claiming innocent lives literally every week in every major city in this country. And yet Democrats and liberal prosecutors in major metropolitan areas continue to work out their fanciful agendas, to do bail reform and go easy. What we need is strong commitment to law enforcement. We need leadership in Washington, D.C. that'll marshal the resources of the states, marshal the resources of the American people. But let me also say it's about opportunity. I mean, a lot of people don't know that those Trump-Pence tax cuts that we got signed into law go away at the end of 2025 if we don't have a Republican president and a Republican House and a Republican Senate. When I'm president of the United States, we're actually going to cut taxes further. We're going to extend those tax cuts, and we're going to close the Federal Department of Education, block grant all that funding back to the states. With a growing economy and educational choice and law enforcement, we will bring our cities.
Okay, time for me to get in Pence's booty. Okay, Pence and Christie and all of them up there. Let me just ask you, they're talking about this homelessness problem, about these urban cities where we have so much homelessness and crimes. Why don't we talk about the uneven distribution of wealth? Why don't we talk about historically how Republicans are protecting their rich millionaire lackeys and their golf clubs and their country homes and their, I won't even go into those rings that they protect, but let's talk about them. Let's talk about how they get the majority of America's GDP and everybody else basically gets diddly squat. How about we even that thing out? If we do that, maybe we wouldn't have so much homelessness and crime. And then to go on, let me just add that it's ridiculous for them to speak on this.
If you aren't familiar with Fox News or right-wing media at large, it's almost impossible to overstate just how much of their coverage revolves around showing images of people, almost exclusively young black men, committing crimes or acts of violence. It's just a near constant sight, over and over and over again, looping videos of acts of violence happening out of context. In fact, when the Republican House Judiciary Committee made its way to New York earlier this week to grandstand about crime in Manhattan, this is how Fox News covered the event.
There are already too many people who believe that they can commit crimes, resist arrest, interfere with police officers, and face zero consequences.
You see that? They've got a small box of Jim Jordan talking and then just looping random videos of crime in a split screen with, Jordan spewing nonsense about out-of-control crime. So is it really any wonder that folks who consume that kind of media all day are paranoid?
I lost my thought for a second there, but Chris Hayes puts it so perfectly. Yes, if you saw that all day, you would be a little spooked. You would be a little bit freaked out. But that is not the everyday story of the American life, and the fact that you see that on a loop all the time on these far-right news medias, sometimes when somebody tells you that you're blue enough, you might start to turn blue. Your skin might be brown as I don't know what. But if somebody keeps telling you, you're blue, you're blue, you're blue, you're blue, it becomes a self-perpetuating prophecy. And I'm not saying that crime is wrong, not trying to excuse it, but many of these people in these areas that they're showing on loops are treated like spit on the ground. Spit on the ground. Okay, look at Jordan Neely. Spit on the ground. What do you expect when nobody is giving them a break? Where's our compassion?
New York cops kill a mentally ill individual while he's eating fruit. Let's put up the picture full mass. Now an investigation. Alabama police tased an unarmed black male to death. Put up the picture full mass. Let me give you the background to this insanity. Jawan Dallas, 36 years of age, has been tased to death by the Alabama police despite being unarmed and subdued after being falsely suspected of a burglary of a mobile home he was nowhere near.
So, we can't sit here and talk about crime crime and homelessness if we don't talk about the absurdity of the wealth gap and if we don't talk about how the police was literally formed in the United States to protect slaves. And they got that same mentality today. They see a black person and that is their target. I kind of think that there could be like the movie How to Drink Your Juice when you're in the hood. Oh my God, it's such a long title. But there's the white collar crime, the white guy who's stealing everything from this convenience store. But this Asian convenience store owner is so concentrated on the black people who literally aren't stealing anything, but there's a white dude in front of them stealing everything, not even looking at him. We have people like Elon Musk just stealing. I'm not going to say stealing. Let me not get sued here. But
after he was arrested yesterday, apparently today, Donald Trump has called for America to defund the police, particularly the FBI, the Department of Justice. Raise your hand. Who thinks that's a good idea? All right, nobody.
Who is trying to defund the police? In this case, it's the last Republican president, Donald Trump, the current frontrunner for the 2024 nomination, explicitly calling, as you just showed, for defunding the Justice Department and FBI. He says until they come to their senses. Now, he does have some support here on Capitol Hill from those aligned with him, those close to the MAGA movement, such as Jim Jordan, the congressman who is the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, oversees the Justice Department. There's Marjorie Taylor Greene, the far-right firebrand whose stock and whose power is going up in the House of Representatives. And these Republicans control the House. There is a government funding deadline of September 30th coming up where this could theoretically come into play. Remember, party leaders have not weighed in on this yet for the most part.
Oh, what was that, Mike Pence? You said that we need to defund, that Democrats said we need to defund the police? No, I think it was Donald Trump and MAGA who said that we need to defund the police. Why? Because anytime they talk about this two-tiered justice system, but it's a self-accusation, you know. Every accusation is, I can't even think of the quote, but you know what I mean. They're talking about themselves.
All right, we've been seeing images of police officers from all over the country for 9 days now responding to these demonstrations and these protests nationwide. But did you know there was a time when we as a country, America, did not have an organized police force anywhere in the entire country? So let's go beyond the headline this morning and take a look at the history of the police force in America.
The law enforcement system we have today wasn't shaped until the mid-1950s. Back in colonial times, there were no police officers. Communities would simply hire someone to act as night watch. It wasn't very effective. Most of the time, the watchman would sleep through his shift or get drunk. The first time we saw an organized law enforcement system was just before the Civil War. Cities set up what they called a slave patrol, a group to prevent slave revolts and hunt down runaway slaves.
Oh, okay.
The story of what housing and other living conditions look like for many Black Americans is pretty bleak, and that's by design. In addition to artists cataloging their very personal experiences, it's been proven that the modern phenomenon of concentrated Black poverty was an intentional government-sponsored institution.
Yeah, I don't hear the Republican Party talking about how the police was formed to catch runaway slaves. I don't hear the Republican Party talking about how the ghetto was literally created by the government. You know, you should look into phrenology. Look into, you know, how, yeah, look into your history.
We have all had a front row seat to Elon Musk going off the rails this year as he continues to drive the site formerly known as Twitter into the ground. It's been a dangerous game to watch, with someone so volatile in charge of a major source of information and political discourse. But his influence on U.S. policy goes far beyond that, ranging from space to energy to even funding Ukrainian soldiers access to the internet. As Ronan Farrow reports in The New Yorker, there is little precedent for a civilian becoming the arbiter of a war between nations in such a granular way, or for the degree of dependency that the U.S. now has on Musk in a variety of fields. In the past 20 years, against a backdrop of crumbling infrastructure and declining trust in institutions, Musk has sought out business opportunities in crucial areas where, after decades of privatization, the state has receded. The government is now reliant on him, but struggles to respond to his risk-taking, brinksmanship, and caprice. Ronan Farrow, investigative reporter and contributing writer for The New Yorker, joins me now. And Ronan, so great to see you.
It's always a pleasure, Joy.
Even though you just scared the hell out of me with this piece. I'm sorry.
Well, and I love you for reading that whole long tract, because we were talking about this in the break. This is a piece that is about those big themes, not just the scoop. So I really appreciate your highlighting that in a thoughtful way.
Well, the Starlink thing is particularly frightening. OK, so this is, you know, essentially he controls the access to the internet that Ukraine depends on to survive in the midst of a war. And he seems to be becoming pro-Putin and against continuing to help.
And, you know, I talked to NASA officials who warned that we're going to see even more dependence on him in this area, because he's filled so many of the orbits of the Earth with his satellites that he is just going to be an ongoing, if you'll forgive the phrase, center of gravity in this world.
Let me read the scariest line. I want to read the scariest line in the whole piece. SpaceX is currently the sole means by which NASA transports crew from U.S. soil into space. And then you name a bunch of other agencies, which you could go on, the Federal Aviation Administration, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, and on and on. Even the chargers that the Biden administration is depending on for this electric car, it's all him.
Yeah, he has 60% of the charging stations for electric vehicles in this country right now. So any green energy policy is going to have to revolve around and work with him in significant ways.
And is he stable? Because you talk about ketamine here, you talk about some behavior, telling his wife, I'm the alpha, and not that marriage not lasting long. Is he stable?
Well, while I think the bigger warnings in this story are about the systems of modern capitalism that concentrate so much power and wealth in so few, There's also a fair set of warnings about Elon Musk that some people close to him are sounding. And in a way, he is a perfect illustration of those bigger themes, Joy, because there is so much to be said about the ways in which he has pushed progress meaningfully, and we have benefited from that. But also, he is a figure that makes it difficult to rely on him. He is subject to erratic turns. We have seen him slip into political radicalism in a way that, you know, I think people fairly find hurtful and destructive to other human beings. His own daughter is a trans individual, and he has really descended hard into anti-trans sentiment on Twitter. That's just one of many examples. He's spreading a lot of misinformation. He is trolling people in a way that is very rooted in alt-right vernacular, calling people pedophiles all the time.
Yeah.
So you take a guy with this much power who is talking openly about his sadness, his isolation, his loneliness, who is, as you say, known and reported to be using a variety of different substances that can contribute to erraticism, even though, I should caution, many of those can also be used in healthy, medically prescribed ways. There are people around him who are concerned. And then we as a nation, and indeed as a world, have to be concerned because wars depend on him.
Yeah.
Major policies depend on him.
The thing I think that is the bigger picture, and I want to come back to that because I think it's an important point you make. You know, this country has been through periods where we've over-depended on very rich men to fund the government, to do things the government should be doing. How many other Elon Musks are controlling a lot of our what should be government functions?
I'm glad that you mentioned that, because this story about Elon Musk, like most of the stories I'm drawn to, is not about one person.
Right.
You're absolutely right. There is a billionaire set right now of hyper-wealthy individuals who are less prominent than Musk. And because they are less colorful, they are pulling the strings in all sorts of significant ways. Now, Elon Musk is unique in the number of industries.
I'm going to end this by saying some things that you probably really won't want to hear. And, you know, they just have to be said. The GOP primary debate was useless. Even with heavyweight poolers like Christie and Hutchinson, who are fighting for this good fight, so sort of turn the page with this chapter with Donald Trump and move on and move forward, even with that, we still have complicity in looking at the real infrastructural issue of the American economy. Issues that are always going to be a problem that we're going to have to address and readdress and redress like a wound. That's going to be the anti-black problem, the problem with racism in the United States of America that goes back to slavery. We're going to have to keep advocating to break down those glass ceilings and those barriers for marginalized communities, improving the safety and the health of those communities, to manicure them, to not look so horrible, because they made them look horrible because they thought that we were less of people, to get more black people in representation in government and in middle management, you know, to create initiatives to get rid of white supremacy and white nationalism. But the reason I played that piece about Elon Musk is the second thing that we need to do, and this is applied to Democrats and Republicans. People are angry that they don't have money to pay for gas. They're angry that they don't have money to buy a house like generations before them. They're angry that they're not getting the job opportunities that their qualifications merit. That is because a handful of billionaires have sucked the life out of the economy. So we have to address the distribution of wealth, and sadly that means addressing some of the cronies of some of these Republican candidates, and that's what they don't want to tell poor whites. Now, I had watched this video on Roland Martin where he explained that poor whites all around America have been duped by Donald Trump. And some of them understand that, but they keep going because of white supremacy. Some of them aren't realizing what's going on, and they don't realize that their wallets, their economy, the opportunities for their children and their grandchildren actually get hurt by the Republican Party. But since they've been Republicans for so long, they don't want to sort of change out of that scope of thinking. And he explained that from an American perspective, not just from a statewide perspective. And I could not for the life of me find that video. But I did find one where he's talking about Mississippi. I just want to highlight here that I'm not trying to focus on Mississippi. I think it was Mississippi. I'm not trying to focus on any one state where, poor whites are really the deciding factor to say, are you going to put your foot down and say it's not right for you to treat your neighbor, your brother, your sister like this, your fellow American like this, whether they be African American, but also whether they be from another marginalized community, from the Asian community or the Latino community or the LGBTQ community. Ask yourself, is this morally right for you to treat your brother like this? And ask yourself, if it hurts them and it also hurts me in return, because it does hurt you in return, am I going to continue to do this? Remember, you're putting hands into the pockets of billionaires and millionaires, taking it away from the marginalized people and maybe putting some few cents and dollars and $100 and maybe even hundreds of thousands of dollars. But the majority of that money is not going to the people, a lot of them white people who are supporting the Republican Party. And some of it comes back to education, but we have to resolve this anti-black issue and the racist issue, the xenophobic, the homophobic issue in America, because it affects everyone. Listen.
It is interesting when you look at 300,000 folks in Mississippi who are uninsured. When you look at governor refusing to expand Medicaid there. When you look at the education stats, you look at we look at the education stats, the health stats. When you look at all those things, Mississippi literally is 45th to 50th. Mm-hmm. And so whenever I hear Republicans ask the question, well, to black folks, why do you vote Democrat? Look, flip it. You got to ask white folks in Mississippi, why are you voting Republican when you are literally 48th to 49th in education, 40th to 49th or 50th in health care, and then, of course, when you talk about economic development, about 45, 46.
It's hard to figure out for me. I know you're going to say it's not hard to figure out at all. But for me, it's hard to figure out why there are so many issues in certain states and certain parts of the country. Now, when you look at folks and you say, well, why vote Republican? If school choice worked the way it was supposed to, that would be an alternative. That would be a solution as far as education. And it seems to me that one of the best ways, long-term, not short-term, but long-term, to turn around a lot of the economic issues and situations and generational issues is
but still applies.
Well, that's sure the case in Mississippi.
Clearly,
I mean,
I said if it worked the way it's supposed to. I did qualify it that way.
And one of the things I find to be real interesting when you talk about Mississippi, I was watching a video. Actually, Alexandria Pelosi had gone there. And a number of people, they were saying, well, look, we believe in God. I'm going, yeah, I believe in God too, but y'all broke as hell. And again, when you look at, and the fact of the matter is, it amazes me when I listen to people in Mississippi talk about, well, we don't want any help from the federal government. Do they know the percentage of their budget comes from the federal government?
So they are given to the federal government, but they're not going to take from it.
I'm just trying to figure out how.
Because of pride.
Republicans nominated somebody like the candidate they did, who's now the next U.S. senator.
Remember, the governor picked her.
He didn't even want her. I mean, they didn't even want her, and then Trump was soft on her until the very last minute when he saw the polls squeezing together, closer and closer. And finally he said, well, what does he say? I got to do the tweets and I got to show up. And I think that at the very last minute he came down and decided, look, here I am. She's my girl. And I'm just trying to figure out why they keep electing bad people to office.
I mean, she's not the brightest bulb in a dark
billionaire and millionaire cronies.
She's not. In fact, the governor thought, well, maybe I'll appoint myself. They got her. It looks nice. But the Republicans today are going full force and saying she's the first woman elected to the federal delegation from the state of Mississippi, since Reconstruction? That's not really something to celebrate in the Trump era.
Cleo, again, the race is an issue. I don't care what you say. Mississippi, unlike really any other state, I mean, it breaks very clearly white, black.
Yeah.
Can I finish shaking my head first? Okay, I'm finished. I'm shaking my head because both of you said, or I'm paraphrasing, but you both imply, I don't get it. You know, why are people supporting Hyde Smith or Smith Hyde, whatever the lyncher's racist woman's name is?
Hyde Smith.
Okay. Why? And you know why. Come on now. You know why. You know why too. So why don't you just say it?
So since
I mean, it can't change or transform or be possibly different, because these poor white people, for a long time now, but especially recently, are concerned about losing white power. Concerned about people that look like them not being top dog no more.
And while they're concerned about it, they're
all this
losing
logic about health care and resources, that's logical, and that does make sense. Again, I mean, I know I'm being redundant here because I've said this a million times, but these people are like, look, I'd rather be broke with no teeth, and I mean teeth with an F, because they so broke they can afford the TH. That I'd rather be broke with no teeth than have to look up again. Obama and Michelle already scared me to death because they made it clear that we're not superior, and we couldn't afford that psychologically. We need to feel superior, dang it, no matter what. If we broke lights out, we need that illusion of superiority symbolically to get up in the morning.
So that illusion is strong enough to replace what's not in your wallet?
Well, yes. That's a rhetorical question, right?
But see, that's why I said I'm confused, because see, it's not that strong for me.
Well, you ain't a white woman.
Amen. Amen. Okay.
A woman, a man, a cat, a dog, you ain't a white woman.
All right, guys. I showed that because I feel like America really needs to have a sit down and a talk with our friends, our sisters, our brothers, our mothers, our grandmothers, our granddads, our fathers, all our friends. You know, so many people have been pulled into Donald Trump, pulled into the MAGA Republican Party, pulled into fascism and that nationalism and white supremacy. And many of them are innocent. You know, some people, they were that way. You can't change them. They got a dark heart, you know. But some people, they were swayed by the loops. They were swayed by the propaganda from the far right media. And as a result, they are suffering. And I don't think they realize it. I don't think that they realize that, you know, when you're struggling, when your family is struggling financially, and you don't go take those food stamps, you don't go and take that Hope Scholarship to go to college, you don't go take those government subsidies because the Republican Party tells you not to, because the Republican Party is made up of rich people who basically don't even live in the same universe as you. You, the poor person, white mostly, but white or black, you are the one who suffers. Now, one of the reasons black people have continuously voted for the Democratic Party is because the Democratic Party is very clearly aware of America's history of that wealth gap. I mean, even though it's way bigger today, it's always existed. Go back to 1776, and you would have found a lot of those people, you know, a lot of those landowners especially, were willing to go out and commit atrocities towards their own brothers like Lincoln, because they were not ready to let go of that wealth. And in the end, it not only affects poor whites, it affects the entire country. And white nationalism, the KKK, Reclaim America, Proud Boys, however you want to spin it, that's not what's going to be able to put gas in your car. That's not what's going to be able to get you to buy a house when you should be able to buy a house. That's not going to be what's going to be able to get you that job that you know that you're qualified for, but you're not getting. What's going to get it is Democrats and Republicans working together so that it's free and equal for all. It's going to take whites realizing that, dude, you pay taxes to go and get that education. Go get that education. Stop listening to Newsmax and all of this stuff, this far right media. Stop listening to that and go get your education. Okay? Don't have too much pride that when you're down and out that you're afraid to go get food stamps. If you need to, go get food stamps, but keep going on your game, keep going on your education and working towards that American dream. You can do it. It exists. It's why America exists. I mean, and keep advocating. Go and get that education so you can learn of better, healthier ways, more democratic ways to advocate for policies that take the bulk of the power in America out of the hands of billionaires who are so far displaced from everyday American citizens, and bring it back to the everyday American citizens. Elon Musk don't care about you. He don't care about you. I'm sorry to burst your bubble, but he don't, you know. That money is going into his pocket like it's going into Donald Trump's pocket, like it's going into Rudy Giuliani's pocket, like it's going into Jim Jordan's pocket. Jim Jordan's sitting here talking about how he's coming after Fonnie Willis. You have no jurisdiction here. You guys talk about a two-tiered system, but it's really rigged for the wealthy white men who are part of that boys club. The fact that so much of America depends on a far-right extremist who has depression issues, who has substance abuse issues, who doesn't even support their own daughter, who's fallen deeper and deeper into extremism. The fact that so much power is held in individuals like this is not what America was produced for. And that is across the board. Republicans and Democrats need to be advocating together, one, to close this wealth gap. Bring some of that money back to the poor and the middle class, no matter what color they are, no matter what sexual orientation they are. Let's get rid of the distraction tactics and address the issues at hand, okay? Let's close that wealth gap and get it back to the point where when you're at the age where you're supposed to be buying a house, starting a family, getting a car, that you can afford to do that. That when you start ready to retire and it's time for you to retire, that you can do that. Let's close this wealth gap and let's make it a little bit more even for everybody. For everybody. Every race, every nationality, every sexual orientation, every religion. Let's get it back to that. And part of that is recognizing America's history with slavery. Recognizing how black people and anti-black sentiment is weaved into America and why it is so imperative for you to be an anti-racist. It's how we will address healthcare, climate change, education, military, you name it. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. See ya.